Meanwhile, Kenya is seeking, ways of dealing and trading with other countries, and that's why we sign economic partnership agreements with various countries. There was one that was signed with the European Union after the breakaway of the UK from the European Union. We signed another one with the UK. We've been having these conversations about a trade deal with America. During Trump 1, there was a deal. It didn't go through. Biden comes and says, forget about that one. We're going to do another one. They start again. They don't finish it. Biden is gone. Trump is back. We're having a conversation about. There's one that was signed on the 4th of January this year, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement between Kenya and the United Arab Emirates. Now, that has then been taken to Parliament for ratification and all, but there are people who are already raising questions here and there and saying there's some red flags that we need to watch out for. It's an organization called Econews Africa, whose executive director, Edgar Odari, is our next guest. Edgar, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Fixing the Nation.
Thank you.
This is where broadcast meets podcasts.
Yes.
Our economic partnership agreement is that Janet does the quotes every day.
Nice. So you're sure you don't know?
Every day, Janet does the quotes. She has quota-free, duty-free access to all the quotes.
Zero-rated exempt, all of them.
Yes.
Vanessa Nakate, who I've mentioned earlier, is a Ugandan climate justice activist. She wrote a book called A Bigger Picture, My Fight to Bring a New African Voice to the Climate Crisis. And she once said in an article, in the end, we cannot eat coal and we cannot drink oil. Speaking to how policy needs to translate to what it means for the everyday person, that when climate injustice persists, they're not able to live in a safe and clean environment. But how do you understand that quote?
I think the way I understand it is policy has to respond to the lived experiences of the ordinary citizen. Otherwise, then what's the point? Why are you creating policy if it's not touching the very lives it's supposed to actually affect? That's how I understand it.
Yeah,
yes.
Spot on.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Econews Africa, what do you do as an organization?
Econews Africa is a non-profit organization that basically works on the margins of globalization to address information asymmetry between stakeholders. Because what we realize is there's information asymmetry in the sense that you have government, you have private sector, then you have the ordinary citizen. But a lot of times, the government and the private sector operators are dual monopoly of information. But sometimes this information is needed by the ordinary citizen to be able to make informed decisions and choices.
Right.
So we come in between and say, let's try and break down this information. Let everyone be on an equal footing in terms of information. Then from there on, we can be able to move on and say, you can make a decision based on informed choices. Yes.
Before we get into Kenya-UAE specifically, when we think of trade deals, bilateral, multilateral, give me an overview of how those are usually done.
So, there's in 1995, the world established what we call the World Trade Organization that regulates trade between countries. So, the World Trade Organization does these trade deals on a global scale. But then countries are allowed to get into deals between themselves and regions that go beyond the disciplines of the World Trade Organization. So the way it does is, countries come and say, okay, we want to have better collaboration in terms of trade than what is currently present for us under the WTO. So when they do that, they come, sit down, agree that they're going to open up significantly more trade than they've opened up under the WTO. They're going to open up more opportunities for citizens and whatnot between the two countries. Then from that point on, they say, okay, let's open up this trade and let's sign a deal to basically seal the process.
All right.
Yes.
Now give us an overview of the one that was signed between Kenya and the United Arab Emirates.
So January 14th this year, the president of the Republic of Kenya and Sheikh Zayed, I forget the full name, it's one of those long Arab names, they signed a deal. A trade, it's called Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Yeah, the deal was signed, and if you look at the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they're saying it's going to set a new precedent because this is the first time the UAE is actually signing an agreement with an African country.
Okay.
So they're saying it's going to set up the pace and whatnot. But experts will tell you the devil is in the detail. You can sign a nice, beautiful agreement. Sit down and, we've even seen this with President Trump.
Right.
Wakes up and says, we are doing this and this and that. Then when people start analyzing, he even has to backtrack on some of those processes. So that's how it works. and we are saying this agreement, there's more than meets the eye. And if people paid keen attention to it, there should be areas of concern where we need to say, hey, we need to address this before we go any further. Yes.
What are some of those?
So, first of all, even as trade agreements go, Janet, this is a very strange agreement. First of all, I told you, countries agree to open up trade between themselves. It doesn't have goods market access. Goods market access, let me say what I mean. It's to say, Kenyan products going into the UAE will have reduced tariffs or lower tariffs as they enter into the UAE market. It doesn't have that. So, on the basis of that alone, because the only benefits an African country can be able to get out of a trade deal with a country like the UAE or even Europe or America is goods market access. So if goods market access is not there, that's number one. Number two, there's the question of the only other benefit. There are two benefits. One is goods market access, which I've said. Then the second one is, movement of professionals. Like we can have our lawyers, doctors, engineers, and whatnot working in the UAE. So it doesn't even have that because, number one, there's no provision for Kenyans to get access to visas. That's number one. Then number two, they don't recognize our qualifications because there's supposed to be mutual recognition of qualifications. So that if an engineer has qualified maybe from JKUAT and they are registered with Engineers Board of Kenya, they'll be able to get their papers recognized in the UAE and be able to get work there. Those are the only two benefits you can be able to get from such an agreement. None of that is there.
Okay. Are you saying that the other agreements we have, like with the UAE, these ones are there?
No, with the EU.
No, with the EU.
Yes, they're there.
With the UK?
With the EU, we have goods market access. With the UK, we have goods market access. So this one has no goods market access.
So what does it have?
It has commitments without benefits.
Okay.
Explain.
Walk us through.
So we have put commitments. Let me just give you an example. The biggest challenge is going to have is the commitments we have put it up. So what we have put is commitments that go beyond the disciplines of the World Trade Organization. And what happens is that, so for example, let me give you an example of health. We have put provisions for market exclusivity and, we put market exclusivity on the one hand and I'm forgetting this other provision, but then those are the two provisions that have been put there.
What does that mean?
So what it means is this. If you give market exclusivity to a trade deal, it means someone can come, it's basically a monopoly. You give them a monopoly to run that drug for 5 years. So when you give them a patent, they don't even have to have a patent. That's the strange thing about market exclusivity. So they don't even have to have a patent. They come in, they get market exclusivity where they're given a 5-year monopoly to run a drug. Let me tell you what happened in the US. The same provision. Someone came, there's a drug called Cochrane. They took that drug, applied to get market exclusivity. They got it. They sued everyone else who was producing that drug in the market.
For what?
No, to stop producing it.
Because they have
So
market
that
exclusivity.
Then, after everyone else was taken out of the market, they increased the price by 50 times.
Wow.
Okay, so people who go into a lot of research
Yes.
to produce medicine,
Yes.
they patent it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then now they either sell the patent or they sell the drugs plus the patent.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
In this one of ours, are you saying that even the patent is not part of the deal?
So
Even
there's-
drugs that don't have IP,
the way market exclusivity works, you don't even need to have a patent.
okay?
I'll give you an example. Aspirin. Aspirin is a drug that is used for managing pain, and some of its content, it just includes maybe people who have heart attack or clots, blood clots. They use it to manage, heart conditions and whatnot. So someone can come and say, you know what? I want market exclusivity for aspirin. What they do is they just tweak with the biochemists just tweak with one aspect of it. It's called evergreening. You just tweak with one aspect and say, now I have a new drug. Then you come in and say, okay, so first of all, I brought aspirin, but this aspirin is a bit tweaked. So give me market exclusivity for 5 years. Then you chase everyone else who produces that drug out of the market, number one, then increase the prices of access to that market, to that drug. So that's what it works. The other issue is, so there was market exclusivity, then linkage. Linkage, the other provision is linkage. Linkage has a problem in the sense that the linkage is used to basically make it difficult for patents. It makes it very difficult for generics to be able to be accessed in the country. So the way that works is, let me give you an example. In Malaysia, there's what we call compulsory licensing under the WTO framework. Compulsory licensing is where you sit down and say, okay, Janet has a patent for a certain drug, but this drug is essential for the medical situation in Kenya. So you say, we are going to issue a compulsory license against that drug. You issue that drug and you get someone else to produce that medicine cheaper, and you supply that to the market. So in Malaysia, for example, there was a drug that was being used to cure hepatitis C. The cost of that medicine was $73,300. One dose, $73,000. So they issued a compulsory license for the medicine. It came to $100.
Okay.
I'm trying to understand.
Which benefited the Malaysians?
Yeah, of course, it benefited the Malaysians.
Okay.
Even the public health, because government, they have about 500,000 people who have hepatitis C, and that's a crisis. So all these people are able to access that drug at $100 to the tab.
Right.
Yes.
Put this in the context of this particular deal. Are we giving these provisions to the UAE in this trade deal?
Yes, we are.
Exclusively?
Yes, we are.
So this is supposed to be, it's supposed to be, you know, the deal is meant to sort of like, you know, do something to the economy and boost it. But in my head, the alarm bell that's going off is health risks.
Yes.
Is the risks to that. And how do you reconcile that? Because it sounds like, it's like I'm thinking and processing at the same time.
I get it.
There can be risks,
it's the same,
right?
It's the same situation I was with Janet, so don't be surprised. That's the place I was when I was reading this agreement. So there are risks. And, you know, normally all these countries, most of these major countries, when they do trade agreements, they do a cost-benefit analysis. Yeah? So when the CS was submitting this agreement to Parliament, the first question they shall ask is, have you done a cost-benefit analysis of what this is going to mean for the country? None has been done. And I don't remember, by the way, this agreement being negotiated. We just woke up one day and said, oh, it's been signed. So it's not even gone through the normal processes of negotiation, because normally they'll say we are starting these negotiations off and whatnot.
Does it also impede Kenya's ability to either import or produce certain medicines?
Yes. Okay. So the moment you get market exclusivity and linkage, even importing generics becomes a problem. Now, let me just give you a picture to be able to appreciate this fully. We have 1.4 million people suffering from HIV/AIDS in this country. Out of those, 1.2 million are on ARVs. And that is before the Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, the USAID program was cancelled. So under the USAID program, we had 1.2 million people on HIV/AIDS medication. Now so 1.2 million people, then you've cancelled USAID. Who's going to foot that bill? It's government. That's number one. We have about 133,000 cases of TB every year. For AIDS, by the way, we have about 18,000 deaths annually. Then for TB, we have 133,000 cases and about 12,000 deaths every year. Let's go to cancer. We are not doing everything. We can't possibly analyze every other disease, but let's just take the three. Let's go to cancer. Cancer has, I know, for example, we have about 27,000 cancer deaths every year. Yeah? That's a serious disease burden. It's a serious disease burden. And any country worth its salt would say, hey, wait a minute, before we commit on these provisions, let's just think about those figures first. 1.2 million people, 133,000 people, and 27,000 deaths for cancer. That's a serious health crisis. You don't just wake up and start giving commitments without understanding how that's going to affect you as a country. Yes.
What is there a good thing in this deal?
A good thing would have been if they would have even tried to sanction.
Not would have been. Like as it is right now.
No, there's no good thing.
There's nothing that Kenya stands to benefit.
I told you, we would have benefited by getting goods market access, and services sector. It's called Mode 4 under trade in services.
Okay.
Getting our professionals to work in the UAE. None of those things are there.
Are there specifics for what is allowed into the country from the UAE? What specific drugs? What specific treatments?
No. The thing is, and it's a good thing you actually brought that question.
Yeah.
First of all, the UAE has no pharmaceutical industry to talk about. It's a tax haven. So what's going to happen? You're going to get all those Europeans, Swiss, Americans setting up shop there and saying, oh, we are UAE companies, we now want market exclusivity to work in Kenya. And let me give you a caveat. India was given the same provisions to this agreement. India has an agreement with the UAE. They refused completely. They said, no. For the sake of our public health, we are not going to allow these provisions here.
Okay.
Yes.
So India, UAE had a similar.
They have an agreement.
Which other countries does the UAE have such kind of an agreement?
I know they're negotiating with Uganda, they're negotiating with Tanzania, but the Indian one is the one
beyond Africa. Any other market that you'd say you can give us an example and say that there was a similar clause in a deal signed between this country and this country, and this was the effect of it.
So India, the one I know is India. Yeah. That's the one I know. But let me give you an example. For a country like Colombia had a market exclusivity provision in its agreement from 2002 with the US. And it was estimated that it cost the economy around $340 million between that time. $40 million. Now, countries like Australia was negotiating an agreement with the US, Australia and New Zealand. And they completely refused, saying, we cannot afford to put these provisions in this agreement because we can't manage. We can't manage to be able to afford it because it was being estimated it was going to cost the Australian economy about $1.5 billion annually. Because Australia has a very robust, subsidized pharmaceutical industry. So that way people are able to buy drugs from government, but they keep the prices low. So the Americans walked in. The American healthcare sector with its heavy costs. They walked in and said, we now want to do this business here. They told, no. You cannot touch the Australian pharmaceutical industry. This is for our citizens, and it's not open for negotiations.
Okay.
Yeah? So because of that, they refused to have either market exclusivity or the other provision to be able to be put in it.
In the case of Colombia,
yes,
what happened in terms of Colombia? This particular deal, did we see companies from America coming and stopping any other company from any other place?
Yes.
Or even company from America coming and saying, I am the one who has exclusive access here.
Yes. The prices of drugs went the prices of drugs went up by between 13.5 times to 70 times. And because of that, these costs were being borne by taxpayers. Yeah. So, and I'll give you an example. I've told you about. I'll give you another example. In the US, let's even take the US market for example. There's a drug Cochrane is used to treat gout. They took this drug, they chased everyone out of the market. I think I've said this before, and they increased the prices by 50 times more. So these things are actually happening. This is reality. It's happening in Malaysia. We have numerous examples I can be able to give you. And these are actually happening across the globe.
And when they happen, what do the citizens have in the form of redress?
Well, for countries that have been very neoliberal, they have no recourse. Fortunately for us in Kenya, Article 21(2) of the Constitution protects the right to health. And it requires the state to provide the highest attainable state of health with progressive realization benchmarks. So because of that, any person implementing the law has to observe that and say, number one, we are going to basically observe the right to health. And the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to health, at some point they were doing, the UN usually does what we call general comments. So general comment number 14, I think, of 2001, they discuss the right to health. It has accessibility, availability, affordability, and quality. So affordability is one of the requirements on providing the right to health. So if we make these medicines unaffordable, it means we are failing in our duty to be able to provide the right to health as contained in the Kenyan Constitution and Article 21(2).
Before I go to a break, let me ask another question.
Yes.
So this particular Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement between Kenya and the United Arab Emirates.
Yes.
You're saying you have issues with these two chapters, the chapter on intellectual property.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Does it say intellectual property on medicine, or is it
just
intellectual property?
I've just taken a small
So
hive.
medicine is just an example of how this could be applied.
Yes.
So what other areas could this be applied?
So it could come with the industrial designs, because we've made commitments that go beyond WTO disciplines. So industrial designs, if we have innovations that are coming up in the country, or people are trying to basically innovate, it's going to cripple them out, because we are going to have all these multinationals coming in, and they'll cripple out that space and be able to take advantage of the market.
So you can have some Kenyan startup somewhere creating something, a solution.
Yes.
But then some startup somewhere based out of Dubai
Can come and protect
can
and
come
say,
in and say,
this is,
we have a deal.
Yes.
And you, Janet, from wherever you're doing, stop that thing.
yes, that. It's for me, that's what the agreement says.
Let's take a break. We need to breathe. Do you understand? Do you not understand? Let's continue engaging with Edgar Odari from Econews Africa. We're talking about the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement signed between Kenya and the UAE in January this year. Has been taken to Parliament. You'll tell us about that process of what happens in Parliament, and even what happened before January.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And what should have happened, what did not happen. We'll be back in a moment. It's 8:30. Good morning.
Right. We have some feedback. Just at the comment here on YouTube, David Mangera, Kwani, deals and agreements are just signed willy-nilly in this country without doing due diligence. What is the work of the AG? Yeah, I think everything that Edgar is saying is just surprising us. The more he's exposing.
Advice.
Advice.
You can advise as an AG.
Okay.
Whether they
listen. But it's a constitutional office.
Yes.
The Attorney General's office.
Yes.
It is not one of those where it's a presidential advisor on attorney. No. It's a constitutional office.
Right.
Chief legal advisor. Everything must go through the eyes of the Attorney General.
But you remember,
before
Eric,
you go and sign.
you remember the former Attorney General, was it Muturi?
Yes.
Saying he was stopped in Dubai and told, sign that agreement and come with it home.
You remember his former
He
boss
was
saying
seated right there when
"You're
he
a
said
fairly
that."
incompetent AG. Both arguments.
Bring
could
them
fall, yeah? Okay, now if you go to the mfa.go.ke, that's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, mfa.go.ke, you'll find a statement that was published on the 14th of January this year at 9:15 p.m. at a time Stampiko Apo. President William Ruto and His Highness, now listen to the name, of the Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of the UAE, have presided over the signing of the Kenya-UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, marking a historic milestone in the economic relations between the two countries. The CPA is the first agreement of its kind signed by the UAE with a mainland African country. It strengthens Kenya's position as a gateway to East and Southern Africa and reaffirms the UAE's role as a global logistics and financial hub connecting the Middle East, Asia and beyond. Now it goes on to talk about the trade between Kenya and the UAE. Kenya exports 9.9 billion worth of meat and meat products to the UAE in 2023, representing more than half of Kenya's total meat exports. We're going to the UAE. Other notable exports include fruits, primarily pineapples, avocados, and mangoes, which account for 5.2 billion shillings. Then there's vegetables and flowers, supporting millions of livelihoods across the country, generating 5.6 billion. And then in return, UAE supplies Kenya with critical goods, including petroleum, machinery, chemicals, and other essential products. Umesikia dawa imetajwa hapo? Haya, tuendelee. A couple of paragraphs.
Other essential.
Inaweza kuwa. Haya. This agreement builds on Kenya's broader trade strategy, which includes key agreements such as the Kenya-EU Economic Partnership Agreement, the Kenya-UK Partnership Agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the African Growth and Opportunity Act with the USA. Kenya has become the gateway to Africa. It is aligning with the bottom-up economic transformation agenda by unlocking new markets for priority value chains, attracting FDI, and promoting technology transfer to support livelihoods. It reflects a shared commitment to sustainability. Now, Edgar, you're here, you're saying all these things.
That's just
flowers.
Those are flowers. That's very flower. It's very nice, by the way.
language.
You know, you read it, you say, hey, they're doing this and then this and then this. But if they're saying they're promoting access to markets, why don't they have goods market access in that agreement? It's very simple. You're saying you're promoting access to markets, but you've not put a clause to allow you to access that market, but you're signing an agreement with them. On what basis is that? In what world does that make sense?
You were saying that there's a journey that this should have taken before
Yes.
it's signed. Could
Yes.
you walk us through ideally what should have happened?
So let me give you an example of what the EU negotiations happened. We have a bit of misgivings about the EU, but even for that agreement, we agree it was done in a fairly transparent
board.
way.
Above board,
Yes.
yeah.
So when those negotiations started, the government sat down and established what we call the Kenya Post-Loan Trade Program, KEPLO Trade. KEPLO Trade would bring all stakeholders. You know, you come from civil society, you come from agriculture, you come from private sector, you come in under KEPLO Trade umbrella. You are given the text, you're told this is what you're negotiating, these are the provisions. You go through them. If you have any concerns, you share them in good time, and you should go meet the chief negotiator. For Kenya, you tell him, we have a problem with 1, 2, 3, 4 clauses. After that process was done, it was then taken to Parliament, and it was at Parliament where it was now ratified by Parliament after those discussions had been done. There are still some problematic clauses, but at least
How long was that process?
it took a bit of time because because of that, because of the problematic clauses that were contained in that agreement. It came from 2003. It came into effect last year.
Yeah.
2003.
Because the
Between
other countries, you see,
2003 and
the other countries,
2024.
we were supposed to conclude negotiations in 2009, but Tanzania, Uganda, and the rest of the East African countries say, you know what, I'm not signing into this agreement because it doesn't cut off my interests. So then, at some point, the Horticultural Crops Association of Kenya complained because we used to access that market under what we call market regulation 20, market access regulation 20 something. So we used to access the EU market under that. They stopped accepting Kenyan flowers and horticultural products under
That regulation.
that regulation. So because of that, there was a push to say, hey, please help us, we need to sign. So Kenya went alone and signed on to the agreement, despite all the other misgivings we have about the other issues. But you understand, because there was a denial of market access.
for a big export.
Yes, for a
Kenya.
big export.
Okay.
Yes. So we participated under the Capital Trade Program. I sat in those trade negotiation rooms, went through those clauses. If we had any issues, we would raise them and say, hey, Mr. Kagiri, the gentleman was called Bernard Kagiri. We have our issues with this agreement. Please don't do this, don't do that, and don't do that. And that was that. But now, on this other side, we just woke up and you're told, oh, by the way, we are signing an agreement.
No,
You see the difference?
No, wait. So, EU you've given us.
Yes.
UAE
Yes.
is capital trade applicable?
No.
It's not.
No.
Okay. So how was this deal negotiated?
I don't know. I can't tell you. We woke up in, me and you, the same way we saw a media output saying 14th Sheikh Zayed and President Ruto are signing an agreement. That's also the first time I interacted with that process. And I remember, because initially, I wrote to the Director of External Trade a while back and told him, hey, I know you guys are negotiating this agreement. Could you please let us in on it and understand what's going on? Never got a reply.
So you are aware that there were negotiations going on?
Yes.
Before January this year?
Yes.
As how far back, to the best of your recollection?
1 year.
So about a year of
Yes.
negotiations.
Yes.
And in these negotiations, it's between officials from the government of Kenya
Yes.
and officials from the
UAE.
Emirates.
Yes.
In the other negotiations,
Yes.
even in the capital trade
Yes.
framework,
Yes.
you don't negotiate. You only deal with the Kenyan negotiator
Yes.
and give your inputs
Yes.
into what then the negotiator goes and
Yes,
and
that's correct.
So what is lacking here was a stakeholder input
Yes.
into our negotiation with the UAE.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also lack of coordination because Minister of Health is not aware of some of these provisions.
Oh.
They're not. No, do this, Eric, very simple. Bring the PS for health or someone and bring them. Because if they were aware, honestly, if they are aware, this provision should not have passed by the light of day. If they were aware.
Another question, teacher. In such kind of deals,
Yes.
who comes up with the text? Like, we have both two sides that are
Yeah.
negotiating.
Right.
As they're going to that room,
Yeah.
does each of them go with this are my asks, and then you meet and compare your asks? Or is it one big boy that comes and, this is what I'm willing to give you, and this is what I want?
Ordinarily, it's supposed to be that Kenya goes with its text and the UAE comes with its texts. But we have, I don't know, for what's the biggest word I know? Lackadaisical. So we have this approach where we wait for the other side to send a text, then we respond to it. And that's problematic because they'll give you, we want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Even in the US negotiations, that's what happened.
You're already coming in from a weak point.
Yeah.
You're pushing back as opposed to setting an agenda.
Yes.
A quick one. I have many quick ones. Where do I begin? Basically, this, to me, your analysis sends the message that we are putting profit before our public health care, before our industries, before anything.
Definitely.
Quite obviously.
Yes.
All these things contrary to the Constitution, as you stated.
Yes.
Ratification, can we push back?
Yes, we can push back at ratification. You know, the last time we were working on the UK EPA, we had challenges in terms of some of the provisions that are contained there. And that's the other thing. They basically copy-pasted the EU agreement.
Wow.
Word for word, by the way, not even a comma was changed, and just said, this is now the Kenya-UK agreement. Anyway, that aside. So the ratification...
Hakuwa na ChatGPT your time.
Save us.
Save us.
Change EU to UK.
To UK. End of story. So anyway, what happened is we've been working with parliamentary committees. There's an informal caucus, parliamentary caucus on business and the economy. We were working with them very closely. It's a bipartisan group, has MPs from all walks of the divide, and we worked with them to basically be able to bring to their attention that, hey guys, this is what this agreement imports. But because that time there was a problem, they basically were told that they could either accept the agreement in total or reject it, but they couldn't amend anything.
Okay.
Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. So what we did with the Parliamentary Caucus on Business and Economy is we went and sat with them. Then after a while, they said, you know what? We need to reassert our authority. So they amended the standing orders because there's a weakness in the Treaty Making and Ratification Act. The way treaties are actually ratified, there's a weakness. So they went and amended the standing orders to say they could be able to have reservations. They can wake up and say, you know what? We have this agreement, okay, we are accepting 125 clauses, but for 4 clauses, we are saying either delete or amend. And given that power, it's a very important power to have because it then gives you the flexibility to say, okay, the agreement in total, fine, but please include market access for goods. Please include, delete clauses that touch on market exclusivity and
intellectual property.
Intellectual property issues, yes. Yeah.
So those exist. Has that happened?
So we took the Parliamentary Committee on Trade has been taking views. And it's interesting, huh? They've been taking views to be able to make decisions on what's going to come. They've postponed that meeting thrice. The meeting has been postponed thrice. Then the latest one is we submitted written applications, written submissions. So we are not sure if the written submissions are going to be the final decision, then let's make a decision, or they'll actually have a hearing. But that's where we are.
So, Edgar, there's nothing we can do, basically.
No,
Parliament
can actually do something.
Okay.
Because like I told you, the parliamentary standing orders were amended. I think it's a parliamentary standing order at 170A. I even remember the clause. At 170A, they have actually put provisions on how to provide, they can either ratify it in full, reject it, or ratify with suggestions in terms of how this is going to pan out. So that's the option. That's the only option we have now. The only recourse we have to, because it's already been brought to Parliament.
Right.
So it's in Parliament's ball now.
which doesn't give any consolation, but okay.
This caucus that you've been working with,
Yes.
when it's on the floor of Parliament,
Yes.
will they express these reservations?
Yes, they did. Like if you look at, if you have footage for the Kenya-UK EPA ratification process, they actually were able to bring in an amendment, despite the fact of being told that they can't be able to do anything on it. But they brought an amendment saying there needs to be a reporting mechanism to Parliament every year on the impact of the agreement.
That was for UK.
UK.
Now for this one,
Yes.
do you have faith that they will do the same?
We have to have faith, because in the absence of faith, there's nothing else we can be able to live with. I really hope.
How do we lobby them?
Yes.
So now, okay, let's take the responsibility.
Yes.
They're our representatives.
Yes.
How do we push them to bring these reservations to Parliament and to make these amendments?
I honestly believe if we are able to bring this conversation to parliamentarians and show them, by the way, guys, this is the provision and this is the import of what it means for the country. They are reasonable people. Hopefully, I'm really hoping they'll sit down this time and say, you know what, let's do something good for the country. But even if they don't, like I said, Article 21 of the Constitution will go to court. Because it directly impacts the right to health as protected under the Constitution, and we have a right as a recourse under the Constitution. Because if the executive has signed, Parliament has ratified, the only option is the courts. Yes.
Edgar, I'd like to believe that these deals are not negotiated by politicians.
No.
They are technocrats
Yes.
who are well versed on matters of trade and signing of bilateral agreements and negotiations, who actually do the fine print,
Yes.
crossing the T's and dotting the I's and negotiating
Yes.
across each other's
Yes.
table.
Yes.
Do we have competent people?
We do have competent people. They just sometimes don't get the opportunity to
be competent?
to put their voices across. Like, let me give you an example of this agreement. This agreement was signed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Where was the Trade Ministry? If this is a trade agreement, I'm not saying, there's a bit of disconnect in the way we do things here. So a trade agreement that has trade experts sitting at Ministry of Trade is signed by Foreign Affairs. That was Mudavadi.
In the absence of the trade
Of course.
technocrats?
Of course.
Without their
Cabinet
knowledge?
Secretary for Trade.
I don't know if it's without their knowledge. I'll be speculating if I tell you that.
Which is why I'm
but for
coming
me,
back to ask.
if a trade agreement is signed by Foreign Affairs, in the absence of a trade person, I would have expected, normally, the CS Trade would say, we've negotiated, because the chief negotiator is supposed to be the PS Trade. They negotiate and they say, okay, Minister of Trade is signing this agreement. But to the extent that you're now taking this agreement from Trade and negotiating with Foreign Affairs.
In the other agreements, who signs?
Sorry?
In the other agreements, in the UK agreement,
And the EU, yeah.
which minister signed on behalf of Kenya?
Trade Minister.
Trade minister.
Yes.
In the EU,
Trade Minister.
Africa Free Continental Trade, blah, blah, blah.
Trade Minister.
UAE?
Foreign Affairs.
Foreign Affairs.
Okay. Can you paint me one dystopian scenario if this thing goes through? Just one. I was going to say, you can also paint me a utopian one, but
So
literally a very real scenario. Should this sail through? I know earlier you were giving health data, so I don't know whether you link it to that, but just give me one scenario that people can consider should this sail through.
So the agreement is signed. The cost of cancer medication, generic cancer medication, is between 10,000 to 100,000. Multiply that cost by 15.4 times, because for Kenya, the cost of generics is 15.4 times less. So do this, 100,000 times 15.4.
100,000 times 15.4.
Yes.
Comes to
1.45 million.
1.5 million.
So anyone who's been paying 100,000 will be paying?
Really?
Yes. And that's just on the lower side of it. You have to consider cancer patients need anti-nausea medication. They need there's anti-nausea and pain medication, morphine and whatnot. Yeah. So that's just dystopia. You said you wanted dystopian. That's the best I can provide for you. Because in Kenya, the cost of branded medication is about 15 averagely. It can go up to 70 times more. But averagely it goes for 15.4 times more than the average cost of generic medication.
I want to look at a positive. Okay, go ahead.
Utopian scenario for the UAE. Because here I don't know if there's one.
There are many.
Utopian scenario for the UAE. They signed this agreement. They have investment companies, pharmaceutical companies, coming to set up shop in the UAE to take advantage of that. Like I told you, they have no pharmaceutical industry to talk about. So they set up shop there, they start supplying drugs here, and they're able to tax those pharmaceuticals at a preferable rate.
Let me read this last paragraph of the statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and then counter it.
Yeah.
This economic partnership agreement will provide the UAE with investment opportunities in several sectors of the Kenyan economy, including energy, water, agriculture, health, ports, airports, logistics, human resource development, and ICT. This aligns with Kenya's government policy of reducing borrowing while enhancing investment capital, foreign direct investment, and PPPs. Basically, it's saying that it opens the door for investors based out of Dubai and the UAE to come and set up shop here in all these sectors, in energy, in health, in ports, in airports, in logistics. And that brings in much needed foreign direct investment.
All that is nice.
Much needed capital injection, much needed growth in our economy.
All that is nice. But who's left with the bill? That's what you have to ask. An investor is not coming. That's not a charity, by the way. You know, there's this craze we have. Oh, investors are coming. They're going to bring us. An investor is coming for profit. They are coming to invest and get profit. That's fine. Everyone has to get some profit. But at what cost to the economy? So for me, if you are telling me you're going to bring in a health investor, and this investor is going to averagely make someone pay 15.4 times more percent for their healthcare costs, please, watch Akai do. Let that investor stay. That's not a good investment. It's not. Yes. Because, I mean, you know, you also have to look at the quality of investment, what it's going to, the kind of benefits it's going to bring to the economy.
Yeah.
So if an investment costs more to the economy than it brings, like I said, cost-benefit analysis. So you're investing, oh, we have an investor in health, they're coming to invest. Then they come in and you have your people paying up to the nose in terms of medication. That's not a good investment.
Okay.
Even from a layman's perspective.
If we were to remove the medicine and pharmaceutical and health sector out of this equation, and let's just look at, because we've seen several conversations, even in the Uhuru days, you know, a conversation about bringing Dubai World, for example, coming to set up operations at the port of Mombasa. If we were to just look at it from that side, would this deal make it easier for UAE investors to come into Kenya and inject capital?
It will make it easy for UAE investors to come into the country.
Okay.
Except the way it's been structured, you know, there's also domestic resource mobilization. So while we bring in investors, we are supposed to bring in enough capital and be able to tax that capital. We are facing a budget deficit, a serious budget deficit. So what's the point of them coming in, investing, and cutting away all the profits? You get my point?
Yes.
If they're coming in to invest and they have the free option of cutting away all the investments, then that's not a good balanced investment. Yes.
Back to the question that Mary asked. So tufanye?
Sasa kitu ya kufanya,
Acha
nikupange hivi. So the way to do is parliament. We have the first option we have is parliament. Parliament amended its standing orders, I think, under clause 170A of the standing orders, and it allows them to be able to provide reservations. If they have any reservations about any clauses, they can be able to provide those reservations. So we are hoping to meet parliament in the next 2 weeks. The Trade Committee and the Health Committee exclusively. Just to sit with them and tell them this is what it means and this is what you can be able to do. So we'll work with them and tell them this is what you need to do and please try and amend this and try to make this reservation. If that doesn't work, then the courts are the only option. Yes.
Are citizens allowed to send memoranda to the Trade and to the Health
Committee? They're allowed to send memoranda to the Trade Committee. I think the period passed. They had called for submissions of memoranda. They were supposed to have public hearing. They've been postponing 3 times. So we don't know how far that process goes. But any citizen can come and petition. I think the email is clerk@parliament.co.ke.
Yeah, that's usually for all petitions.
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
That Econews create a template that we can use to submit and then send to the clerk.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
Happy to do that.
That's good.
Yes.
Accompanied with just a memo, like a simplified version of this is the deal, this is what it contains, these are the red flags.
Yes.
And
as a citizen, I'm concerned.
That I can do. Very easily.
Do that.
And then we can take up the job of getting people now to 100%. Send it to the clerk.
Okay.
Yes.
Sawa.
Nice.
Edgar Odari, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. Hannah Munyao says, thanks, Edgar, for schooling us on this deal. I'm just like, yo.
That's what she's written.
Yo.
There needs to be a team of sober Kenyans, Siokina MPs, Hawajui Kusoma, to help read some of these agreements. This is what you put in brackets, not me. Passing Felix Mutiso to America, you in brackets. But to your point, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. In a few weeks, you'll keep us posted. But thank you for breaking that down. Very helpful.
Indeed. In the next hour, do we want change? Change you can believe in? Really?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, keep it here. We'll be back shortly. It's 9 a.m.